Okay, this is our introduction to assignment 6, which is a logo mashup project. So if we log in to Canvas, you can find the assignment sheet. And I pick a theme every semester for it. And this semester's theme is the NLC Survivalist Handbook, and kind of coming up with a cover icon for it, a logo for it. And you'll find all those details under assignment sheets through our Canvas page. And it's called, for the first time, we see this word vector. It's called the Vector Logo Project. And that's because it's not pixel-based. It's going to be entirely created in a different way with anchor points and mathematically derived curves that are filled or outlined based on those anchor points. But I call it a mashup project because you're not supposed to just draw anything that comes into your head. I want you to be informed by stuff that already exists. So I say here in bold, you are expected to start with an image or part of an image that already exists in the culture. Based on that, you will sketch thumbnail concepts for how you can modify that image or combine it with other images to suit your own creative goals. So that's what I mean by mashing things up. In the past, for Earth Day, we've done things like taking oil company logos, I'll show you that, and making a new logo out of them that has an environmental message. So last semester, this is what came out of assignment 6 for our Earth Day theme. You know, compositing together BP, Shell, Chevron, Citco's icons into something new, right? And you got to make it in black and white first, and then you can do a color version. Now, both of these are vector files. And this is new because if I zoom in on them, you will notice these curves never become unclean. You're never going to see the pixels. There are no pixels. The only pixels are the pixels of the screen that's showing it. But I can just keep zooming in until my computer just kind of breaks down. All right. So how do you get perfectly clean cutouts? And I always think of vectors like cut paper. Well, we do it through using programs like Illustrator. For our theme this semester, we are going to use that survivalist theme. So the first thing I want you to do is find reference. And I started by thinking I wanted kind of Nighthawk skulls. And I found some cool things, but these are more like spot illustrations. These are too busy to be logos. So what I might do instead is look for, just do a Google image search of survivalist logos, right? And you'll see that they have a lot to do with the woods and wildlife. I kind of like this one. This one's really straightforward with axes and fire. Fire is pretty important. Water is pretty important. A knife that's a little aggressive. This one's very aggressive.
Badass.
Right? This one's a little bit, I don't know. It's just different ideas.
They're all weird.
Yeah, they are kind of weird. So you can look in different ways. You might have an idea here that you want to kind of make your own mashup version of. You can make it satirical, you know. You can do our Nico mascot, and you can put him in like a gas mask. I don't know. You can do different things. You might also look at badges, because when I think of survivalist, I think of Cub Scouts and Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts. Here you have a zombie survivalist badge. And this is all very much like logos. These are direct visual communication, right? Very clear. So how do we know how to make a good logo? It's different than just making a cool drawing. It has to be efficient, right? So it has to get the message across quickly and effectively. It has to be versatile. So it has to be black and white and color, and it has to work small or large. It has to be the kind of thing that can be embroidered into a hat or into a sweater and still look good, and also be printed on the side of a truck, in full color. So there are three basic approaches that I'm going to share with you. And those three basic approaches, and this is a good thing to know, and this is a good thing that I can kind of test you on later in the semester. One is having something be central and symmetrical, right? So let's do a little slideshow here. And I'm going to write it up on the board. How do we view it? Slideshow. Oh, that didn't work. Let's just do full screen. Okay, let's pick a few. So this logo, if we have three different approaches, one is symmetrical and central. One is that it plays with positive and negative space. And one is that it has dynamic movement that kind of runs the eye through it. Which one do you think this is? Is it central and symmetrical? It is, right? So how do we know that? Well, if we do a dividing line, it matches, it's called bilateral symmetry, right? It's a mirror image left to right. Now this can be central and symmetrical and still be a little bit different side to side. This one isn't. But if all the eye movement goes into the center and is kind of held there, like Target's logo, right? Then it's a central symmetrical approach to design. A lot of the survivalist badges are like this, and often they're circular because that's kind of the most symmetrical shape, right? But what about something like this? Would you call this central and symmetrical? No, not really, right? We divide it down the middle. It's very different side to side. Does this play with positive and negative space in an interesting game? It makes nice shapes. But do the negative shapes, the white shapes here, do they make a separate image? No. So it's just really playing with kind of holes in the shapes. There's also not a lot of horizontals or verticals. There aren't any in this, right? Everything's a curve, right? And because it's asymmetrical, this is what we call dynamic logo design. So the eye moves through it. They're people all connected, yeah. And it says, I don't know that it says Rio. Yeah, I guess it kind of does. I didn't notice that. But yeah, the R, the I. This is a good design.
Oh, I see it.
They probably paid some money for that.
I see.
Not all Olympic logos are this good, but I like this one. So it also says Rio. Yeah, it's got all kinds of stuff to it. But the important thing for just a design approach is this is really going for maximum eye movement, right? The eye doesn't just stay put in the middle like it does for a Target or for Obama's logo. Instead, it keeps moving through it. And that's called dynamic design. Nike's swoosh is a dynamic design, right? Okay, let's look at the third type. Speaking of Boys and Girls Club, I think I have that one. Nope, this is something else, but it's similar. So, is this dynamic? Is this central? Or is there something else going on here? Yeah, so there's parts of it that are central and symmetrical. Like the tree is pretty much central and symmetrical. But it's got this shape cut out of it, right? The shape itself, which is the bird, is dynamic. And if it was the bird alone, that would be a dynamic approach. But by putting them together, you have this play between positive and negative space. So what I mean by that are logos that use the negative space just as much as they use the positive space. So here we read the tree, but we also read the bird. Does that make sense? So that's a third approach you might play with. Let's look at another example. Let's see. What about this one? It's not really dynamic, right? It has a lot of horizontals in it. But it's not symmetrical either. So how does this engage the eye and not just be totally boring?
Making a little city.
By having, the city have as much impact as the key.
So could we do like a different style of key and like have like San Antonio as like the San skyline or something?
Think of what your client is first.
Okay.
Like, so if you don't want to do the survivalist NLC badge as your client, make up a client first.
Okay, so we don't have to tell you what our clients.
You don't have to use the theme I suggest. It's just that's the service learning
But why
part
do
of
you
it.
do that right now?
Okay, what about this one? I think this one's lovely. Right?
Ooh, I think
Because I don't want you to just choose something that you think you can make an easy logo for, right? I want you to work towards and problem solve towards a purpose.
what he means.
And if you don't have a better reason to do it towards the purpose of the survivalist badge, because that's challenging.
Wait, it's like, can I make a logo for like my job?
Let's talk about it after I've done the demo. But yes, that sounds like that could work. So what approach is this? So let's go through them. Central symmetrical, that's one approach, right? Where it brings the eye into the middle. Dynamic, which brings the eye like across and through it. Or playing with positive and negative space, which is you're reading the negative space as powerfully as the positive space. All right, so this is symmetrical, and this is actually perfectly symmetrical, which is what makes it so cool. If you divide it perfectly in half, it's a perfect mirror image, right? And yet, the font choice on its own, the shapes themselves are very dynamic. What's cool about this, and this is a very specialized kind of font design trick, but this is, what is a man, a plan, a canal, Panama? What are those called? Palindromes. This is a palindrome type.
I don't even know.
So a palindrome is like mom. It's the same forward as backwards, right? So this is a type solution for Paris. Do you see Paris in there? But it can be read the exact same forward and backwards. You guys see that? So it works the exact same way in the mirror. So this is a little brain chemistry trick using a process of cognitive reasoning called closure. And it makes us understand that this is more of a dynamic image than it really is. So logo design can get pretty complicated. But by those basic approaches, you're going to create something that's pretty engaging. This is dynamic, right? This is central and symmetrical. This is central and symmetrical. This plays with positive and negative space. And realize they don't need a ton of colors and a ton of special effects to do that. So to fit the theme for the survivalist patch, I might go to Google and I might look at something and then think, yeah, I have a lot of deer around where I live. I'm curious, how can I make a logo with deer that's interesting? And then you do some sketches, right? So these are some sketches I did for an Earth Day project before, and I ended up using this one, which had kind of like a deer with a leaf. But I kind of like this sketch too, and see this as being a good survivalist, finding food, living, breaking out. So what approach would this one be? Is it central and symmetrical? Is it dynamic, or is it positive and negative space?
So for this one, can I sketch it out?
Yeah, this one's definitely more dynamic, right? Yeah, so we're going to start with sketches.
Okay.
And that's your homework over the weekend. And it's good to start with inspiration and then make your own versions, right? The other idea I had, so this might be one. The other sketch I was playing with is this one, which is a little bit more intense. But I was looking at all of like the trophy hunter logos and badges and things. And I like the idea of like just a deer head, but instead of it being the skull and being all pro hunting, make it a little deer angel. I like the idea of a deer angel, and it looks kind of dead. When you taxiderm deers, their eyes are replaced with glass. So I just take the eyes out completely, make it look a little freaky. But then it doesn't say anything about Texas. So I can put in a Texas Lone Star hat there. It's not really drawn in the right place, so I would merge that. So if I were to do one of these two to show you how to do a logo design, This one's more central and symmetrical, especially once I get that hat there. This one's more dynamic.